Well, a monster's brewing in the Gulf as we move through this Monday, and the potential for some Gulf Coast impacts are there, but I don't want to undersell the idea of some potential flooding further north and inland as this system moves ashore, potentially slowing down. We're going to look at that. Plus, we're going to take a look at the broader forecast at large because there are some changes on the way for some areas. We're already starting to feel that taste of fall, but that could go away this week. Maybe it'll come back. It's going to come back eventually, right? Okay, here's your earliest wind speed times. Check this out along the Gulf Coast. Maybe as early as this evening here along South Texas, and then up here along the Gulf Coast heading into Tuesday and then into Wednesday as far north as New Orleans. And then look, those inland impacts, I think there's still some question as to how strong those impacts will be. But look at this guidance. Still pretty tight guidance here. This is just modeled data. This is the ensembles. Hopping over to the European ensembles, it also has a very similar output, an idea of this thing coming ashore somewhere here along the Louisiana coast. Again, I still think you've got to keep an eye on this here across Texas. There will be impacts here regardless of where this goes because this is going to be so close to the shore that on-flow current here is just going to be strong on the ocean. Also, the winds are going to be gusty. High tide was going to be a problem with some storm surge too. So that's something to keep an eye on here along these coastal areas. Now, in the upper levels, here's our trough in the east. This is what's been keeping us so cool over the last couple of days. We've got this ridge too back here across the west, and then underneath that ridge it's just been baking across the Central Plain states, and some of that cool air though being felt pretty far south with an early taste of fall. Some record lows in some areas of the east over the last couple of days in the mornings where we've dropped down into the 30s in some spots and 40s for sure. But that does start to show some signs of change. Now, here's our tropical system in the Gulf. I want to show you what's going to be driving that. Here's a shortwave trough that starts to develop here across Texas. We're also watching a broader trough across the Pacific Northwest that eventually, hopefully, will start to pick this thing up and pull it further north. If it doesn't, that means it could be, I think, a decent rainmaker late in the week. Now, there's that lower pressure in the mid-levels, and then, again, starting to pull that thing north with that trough here across Texas. And now we start to kind of see that merge. Your bigger trough that would likely pull it further to the north, still way back to the west. And if you look at the latest European, the idea is for this ridge to kind of amplify here. You don't want to see this, right? This low cutting off across the west, and now there's nothing to drive this. That doesn't look good. You've got this ridge kind of like this. You don't see a trough to the north just swinging through like this and picking it up and taking it out of here. So does that mean this thing lingers and meanders through the weekend? I think there's still a lot of uncertainty with that. No one has a crystal ball and says this is exactly how it's going to be this early in the game. So pay attention this week as we could see some changes. Here's a quick look at the operational European run from overnight. The idea is still, again, bringing this thing and strengthening it right here just off the Texas coast and then moving it into Louisiana, eventually Mississippi. The track taking it almost right up the Mississippi here, and then a lot of rain. I think severe weather is going to be a problem too. You're going to have wind shear on the southeast side of this and the east side of it, also the northeast side. So really something to keep an eye on too, not just along the coast, but inland too. Flooding, that's going to be a concern. These are modeled data, rainfall totals somewhere between 7 inches around the coast, 8 inches, and then inland we could see 4, 5, 6 inches or more in some areas. Still early in the game here. One thing you'll notice too, take a look at all the dry air. These are dew points that we're dealing with right now. Anything in blue and sort of this whitish and even the purple and pink, that's dry air. Here's your real humid air. Really, it's been suppressed to the south. That's our early taste of fall that we're feeling, that dry air. But look what happens. I'm going to put this into motion really quick. Look at all the moisture that just gets pulled north, regardless of where this tropical system specifically goes. Now you've just injected all of this surface moisture here across the east, so it's going to start to feel tropical again. I mean, really anywhere east of the Rockies. So, yeah, it's going to feel like summer again, I think, for a while. All right, here's your high temperatures on Monday. Not bad, right? We're talking about 60s and 70s. Quite pleasant here from the Great Lakes all the way into the Mid-Atlantic. Back into the 80s across the south. We're still hot here. Another cool morning on Tuesday will likely drop into the 30s and 40s. Maybe not as cold as we've seen lately, and there's your warming trend. We're starting to see it Tuesday into Wednesday. And look at Wednesday. Now we've got some decent heat moving back toward the Great Lakes, back into the 80s from Wisconsin over to Michigan, down into Ohio, upper 80s possible, close to 90 in some of these areas. And the clouds and the rain starting to be felt here along the Gulf Coast, keeping temperatures back a little bit. Another hot day across the plains too, mid to upper 90s here. Not quite as cool as we've seen in the east. No relief from the heat here. It's just going to be another scorcher from Oklahoma north into the Dakotas. And then down into Texas, we stay hot too. And it's also hot across the far southwest with temperatures in the triple digits. Severe weather today on Monday, possible across the northeast. That's really the highest threat area. But over the next couple of days, we start to focus again here across the South Storm Prediction Center, already looking at southern parts of Mississippi, Alabama, down into Louisiana, as that landfalling tropical system moves ashore with some of that wind shear. Here come the storms this afternoon, though, across parts of New York, moving out of Ontario and then eventually into the northeastern states. So we're looking at from Vermont over to New Hampshire later in the afternoon and evening. But really, I think New York, that's the area to watch here from Rochester back to Buffalo. I don't know if it's as far west as Erie. Most of it looks like at least the strongest storms will be here into the upstate of New York, and then eventually those calm down as we head into the overnight hours. I don't think that they make it much further south than Albany, and then there's your rain across the Gulf Coast starting to pick up ahead of our tropical system here. Let's look long term now. All right, this is looking into next week. These European weeklies always have a hard time, I think. Anything long-term is tough. And someone asked, do I do a winter forecast? I typically don't do winter forecasting because there's so many variables, right? I mean, let's face it, it's tough to get a forecast right just a few days out, much less 4, 5, 6 months out. Even a month out's tough. I do like to look at trends, and I think last winter was a good example of forecasts that it looks like it's going to turn cold, 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 and it did not. So egg on the face is easy to happen. So I always say, I will say what I think is going to happen, but I also say, hey, this is like a flounder. Sometimes you got to choose sides, one or the other. What's it going to be as you flip-flop around? But next week, I'm choosing this side. It looks like we're cool across the west. And again, I think we warm up across the east. Temperatures getting back above average, and it starts to feel more like summer again as we round out the last official days of summer. And then long term, I mentioned this yesterday too. Look at this. That's that 540 line, those colder temperatures. Look at this. You could see it starting to grow as we move seasonally toward the end of October. That's typical. The models take that into account. They're seeing that as our seasons are definitely underway with some change. All right. See you next time, guys.